It's entertainment for Trump. It's a
he's the president of the United States.
Listen,
this is a statement from the president of the United States.
I have lived through this.
Yes, you have.
And in good times and bad times, the president enjoys taking a grenade out on a Saturday afternoon, throwing it on the floor, and watching everybody react. Now, could it be a distraction? Could it be a diversion? Could it be just pure entertainment? This is what the president
So
does.
he's not saying the president's
And there's
above the
no
law.
downside.
Hi, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in New York. If it's an emperor Republicans want this President's Day, maybe it's about time they just say that and drop any and all pretense, because Donald Trump sure has. Trump's first chief of staff there in his first term, Reince Priebus, dismissing what Jamal Bouie of the New York Times calls, quote, the single most un-American and anti-constitutional statement ever uttered by an American president. Trump this weekend posting a quote to social media often attributed to Napoleon. It reads, he who saves his country does not violate any law. Perhaps more alarming than that interpretation of presidential power and its unlimited scope is that the Supreme Court, in its ruling on presidential immunity last summer, has already sort of agreed with Napoleon and Trump. In her dissent in that case, provided with what she called a fear for our democracy, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote this, quote, the relationship between the president and the people he served has shifted irrecoverably. In every use of presidential power, the president is now a king above the law. So it's with a keen eye that we'll be watching the Supreme Court this week as it begins the process of further clarifying what presidential power means in this country right now. In the very first case to reach the Supreme Court arising from Donald Trump's flurry of executive actions these past few weeks, the justices will again shape the scope of presidential power in a case having to do with who Trump can fire and who he cannot fire. But Trump's mantra that, quote, he who saves his country does not violate any law, end quote, isn't limited to presidents in his telling. If his supporters, for instance, believe that to be true, what stops them from doing whatever they want? Just ask the January 6 rioters who find themselves back in court for other offenses. According to the Wall Street Journal, many of them are right now arguing this, quote, that they should be absolved of other alleged crimes, such as illegal gun possession, child pornography, things discovered during the January 6 investigations. At least one defendant has died in a post-pardon altercation with police. And so that's the question now before all of us. Some people have taken to the streets about it. Some people are becoming more attuned to the news because they're unsettled by it. It's a question that'll be evaluated over the next days and weeks and years. Just how much power should Donald Trump really have? It's where we start the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. The president of Media Matters for America, Angela Carasone, is back. We started this conversation in the last hour. Also joining us, former prosecutor for the Southern and Eastern Districts of New York, Barrett Berger, is back with us, and former assistant director for counterintelligence at the FBI, MSNBC national security analyst Frank Figliuzzi is here. Angela, let's pick up where we left off. People voted for Trump for a myriad of reasons, but not one of them in any of the exit polling data I saw or any of the brilliant analyses provided by Steve Kornacki or anyone else I consumed, even on Fox News, said that people were down with ending the full Democratic experiment and installing a king. Again, talk about what is exposed on Trump's flanks here.
Yeah, I mean, the big issue is that a lot of people voted for him for the vibes. Not as core supporters. They voted for something that they wanted. They voted for this type of destruction and revenge. That is the core. That is the base upon which he sort of, projected out this political power. But the way that he sort of got one, right, is he built political power on what used to be considered the fringes. So he brought in a bunch of these fringe figures, and now they're going to have to do a series of actions to be responsive to the people that they brought in. The scary part, as you noted in your intro, is that they started out with a really clear message and guidance, which is that we got your back. As long as you're doing things in line in support of Donald Trump, and in some way, shape, or form, you will not be held accountable for it. That's partly why those pardons are so uncomfortable and scary, is not just for the lack of justice, but for what they meant for the future. So that is sort of the context. The challenge here is that one of the strategies and the tactic is that all those people that didn't like it but voted for him anyway because they didn't really think these policies were real, and Reince Priebus in the intro he played is still a victim of this. They say, well, don't believe all the things he says, even though every time he says something, he goes ahead and sort of acts in accordance with it. Just trust your gut. Of course, that's absurd and ridiculous. He would never do such things. That's what a lot of people rationalize when they made this vote. But they were plain as day. This is not the first Trump time. The first Trump administration. This is the second. And that lack of popularity is both a source of strength and opportunity going forward for preserving our democratic structures. But it's a real weakness. It's a real vulnerability, because the reality is that by scaring everybody, by projecting this kind of power and that right now is not in fact there, it's still up for grabs. It's just trying to project a perception of it. We can choose to either validate it and make it so, or we can take the necessary actions to connect the dots to the harms, stiffen our spines, speak up, and speak to the very people that you identified that didn't really want this. They're, along with all of us, are going to be the source of our democratic resilience. And that's what this is about. This is about scaring everybody into submission. Heroes are heroes for a reason, because most people, when they're confronted, duck and cover. And what they're trying to do right now is not just shift the vibes, but to get all those people that held their nose or voted for Trump for a myriad of reasons, as you noted, to now be stuck. And that's we're at a critical juncture.
I mean, Frank, the most basic reading of a slide toward autocracy deploys despair and hopelessness. And one of the things about Reince Priebus that I thought, watching him talk, is he is known to have been one of the biggest leakers, calling Trump crazy, saying all sorts of things about his colleagues and about Donald Trump. And I jotted down, while he was talking, I jotted down a quick list of the things that people have said publicly about Donald Trump. He's a demonic force, said Tucker Carlson. He's America's Hitler, said J.D. Vance. He's a, quote, despicable human, said Mitch McConnell. January 6th was an act of, quote, domestic terrorism, said Ted Cruz. The people carrying out the enforcement of whatever Trump is saying are all hypocritical in that they've said worse things about Donald Trump than anyone in this program has ever said.
Yeah, we're watching Exhibit A for an unmitigated desire for power and influence and relevancy. That's who surrounds Donald Trump right now. People who literally can't get another job without kissing his rear end. And this Reince Priebus clip that you played, Nicole, nothing to see here, as Angela said. Don't worry, remain calm. He occasionally likes to take a grenade out and throw it on the floor to see what happens. I'll tell you what happens when you play with a live grenade and toss it on the floor. Eventually, it explodes. And the only question for us is whether it's going to explode back on Trump or explode and hurt the rest of us. And my money's on both, by the way. People are going to get hurt, and eventually it will blow back on Trump. And then, with regard to this statement, which again, we shall not believe Reince Priebus when he says, don't worry, that someone who saves his country cannot violate a law. Okay, it's been attributed by some historians who aren't certain to Napoleon, but I'll tell you where it's definitely been used far more recently, and that's with a white supremacist, far-right extremist named Anders Breivik in Norway, who killed 77 people in Norway, the worst modern mass murder in Norwegian history, including a mass murder, 2 separate incidents by him on the same day, including a mass murder at a kids' camp in Norway. And he's the one who describes himself as a neo-Nazi who's used that statement more recently in history. And now our president is quoting that white supremacist neo-Nazi murderer. If you voted for that, you really need to question whether you're American anymore. But that's who's using that kind of statement. And listen, does Trump sit and read Norwegian history? Hell no. Someone is handing him this story, this quote, and we need to figure out who keeps spoon-feeding him the white supremacy, white terrorist philosophy.